YouTube, it's Blue10 joined by ChrisAnimeGuy,
Hello.
aka my boyfriend, and as promised, this is going to be a collaborative thoughts video, and the subject is going to be old school duelists versus new school duelists. And well, age before beauty, Chris, so if you just tell us about why you're a old school duelist, if you see what I mean.
Well, I'm an old school duelist mostly because I only really know the old school. I don't really know much of the new school at all. My limit of new school is the very beginning of 5Ds. That's it.
Yeah.
Really.
And just to prove a point, I've actually got Chris's Cyber Dragon deck here, along with my Blue Eyes White Dragon deck, which we'll probably be using as examples of old school versus new school and stuff. Now, just a quick note, Chris's deck has been up here with me for a whole year, and if you have a quick flick through it, there are some cards in there that are that are not allowed in the game anymore, but he hasn't changed it because obviously it's been with me. And well, as I said, it's Chris's deck. Chris will edit it himself when he gets it, because, well, if I edit the deck, it's not going to be his deck anymore, if you see what I mean. So just being respectful out of that sense. Yeah, and I'm sort of considered a new school sort of duelist. Well, not new school, I'm still old school, that I use like fusion cards and stuff like that, but I've actually kept up with most of the meta, with what cards and what decks are hot and are popular and everything, and I do have understanding of the Exceed and Synchro decks and everything, whereas ChrisAnimeGuy generally prefers the old school version of just fusions and tribute monsters and stuff.
Yeah. I do know synchros, but I don't really know Exceeds at all, and to be honest, I don't really like the look of them anyway, so I'm not bothered by them.
Yeah, I mean, because everybody's different. Everybody's got their own preferences. I mean, some people run a deck without any extra, run a main deck without an extra deck. Someone who run fusions like yourself with your Cyber Dragons. Some people use a mix of all three. I mean, it depends really. I mean, like me, I use a mix of all three. I've got my fusions, I've got my synchros, and I've got my Exceed at the back there. I use a bit of everything. Because, well, it's just, I feel personally that it's actually good to, quite good to keep up with the meta in a way that, you know what's coming and everything. Like I've said in my popularity Yu-Gi-Oh video, even if you don't decide to use some of the new school cards, like the Exceeds and Synchros and effect monsters and stuff, study up on it. That way you'll know what they do, so if you come across them in a duel, well, you're not going to be too surprised by their effects in that, because if I remember correctly, at the Mad for Miniatures tournament that we both went to, you got a bit of a shock with which synchro monster was it that you really hated, or what deck was it you hated?
I can't remember. I think it was Black Feathers and Light Swans. I still hate Judgment Dragon. I still hate him so much.
Ooh. I mean, wasn't the Brionic also a big bother for you? Because I remember you saying No,
I'm not really bothered by Brionic, however you want to pronounce it, really. Just, I mean, yeah, he's, the effect is nice, but it's not as, to me, it's not as useful as, yes, alright, this monster is harder to summon out, but he's far more powerful than Brionic, XYZ Dragon Cannon. More or less the same effect, except you're not you're only limited by the amount of cards you have in your hand for getting rid of cards, and Brionic only bounces them back to the opponent's hand, whereas Dragon Cannon destroys them.
Yeah, but even so, in some cases, bouncing cards back is better than destroying at times, especially with cards like Stardust Dragon.
If you want an easier method of bouncing cards back, because isn't it like Brionic can only bounce back, like, is it 2 cards?
No, it's Big Brother Gunganir can destroy up to 2 cards per turn, but Brionic can bounce any number of cards back to the hand as long as you've got cards to discard.
All right, okay.
Yeah. The only thing that really annoys me about Brionac is the priority rule, because as you know, it's been changed in Japan, but it's in the TCG, Bionic would still get priority to activate its effect, which is freaking annoying.
Me, he shouldn't have the priority because, I mean, I know this sort of thing's already been discussed to death, however many times, but priority ruling is a bit cheap to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I can understand, like, if you first summon the card, maybe, but, like, for example, calling priority just because, on your opponent's turn and that. Surely you shouldn't have to call priority because it's your opponent's turn.
No.
I don't know if that's how it works. But...
No, I think apparently, I was watching a video by Team Dark Art Monarchs, and apparently priority is basically you get the chance to start a chain link 1, and then your opponent can respond to that or something. Something along those lines anyway, but in Japan at least, or the OCG, the priority ruling is only monsters that have a ignition or trigger, is it a trigger effect, I believe? They get their, like, things like the Monarchs.
Which typically they're only when they're summoned.
Yeah,
typically.
So things like Black Rose Dragon and the Monarchs would get their priority because their effects activate when summoned, whereas Bionic is...
In other words, Japan has taken it back to how it was when it first started.
Yeah, pretty much, whereas in the TCG, the American division of Konami hasn't really kept up with that yet.
No, they're cheap. Yeah.
Yeah, don't worry, you can say whatever you want. Oh, give me a second, everybody. Got to pause it for a second.